The crowd had gathered early that morning, their eyes filled with curiosity and doubt as they whispered among themselves. Everyone knew the girl with the old rifle. The wood was cracked, the barrel dull, and more than once it had failed her in practice. Some laughed openly, shaking their heads as if she didn't belong on the line. Others gave her that half-smile of pity, the kind that says more about disbelief than kindness. To them, this wasn't a contest. It was a chance to watch her stumble once again. But she stood there, calm, almost too calm, brushing a strand of hair from her face as if the weight of their voices meant nothing. The announcer called her name, and a hush fell over the field. All eyes shifted to her broken rifle, and for a moment, even the judge raised his brow, wondering how she would manage what was about to come. A test of precision, speed, and steady nerves, the kind of challenge even seasoned shooters sometimes failed. Then the target was released. It wasn't the usual clay disc drifting across the sky. No, this one soared higher and faster than anyone had expected, slicing through the morning light like a bird fleeing for its life. The crowd gasped, and a few laughed louder, already convinced she would miss. After all, how could someone with that battered weapon even dream of keeping up? But she didn't flinch. She didn't rush. She lifted the rifle with steady hands, her eyes following the flying target as though time itself had slowed just for her. In that breathless pause, the field seemed to freeze the wind, the birds, even the whispers in the stands. Her finger rested against the trigger, and her gaze locked on the impossible shot. And then, in a single, sharp motion, she pulled. The sound rang out across the range, echoing like a challenge answered. What happened next made every doubter rise from their seats, their laughter silenced, their disbelief turning into stunned silence. Would you like me to also write the next continuation part after this cliffhanger so you can build the full script flow? The smoke drifted slowly from the barrel, curling upward as the echo of the shot faded into the hills. For a moment, no one could tell what had happened. Eyes squinted against the glare of the sun, searching the sky for the flying target. Whispers spread through the crowd, some certain she had missed, others unsure. But her steady stance, the way she still held her broken rifle as if it were made of steel and fire, kept them glued to the moment. It wasn't only about the shot, any more it was about the mystery she carried with her. Few knew her story, though many had guessed. The rifle had belonged to her grandfather, a man once known for his unmatched skill. After his passing, it was left to her, worn and weathered, the kind of weapon others would have tossed aside. But she never did. While the others polished their new gear and practiced with fancy tools, she chose to train quietly, away from the crowd. People mocked her for it, calling her stubborn, saying she lived in the past. Still, she returned every morning before the sun touched the range, to practice with nothing but patience and persistence. The contest today wasn't just another match. It was the final round of the regional shooting trials, the one event that determined who would move on to the nationals. Everyone knew the stakes. For most, it was about medals, titles, and reputation. For her, it was different. It was about proving that strength doesn't always come from what shines on the outside. It was about showing that a broken rifle and a determined heart could still outmatch the finest steel in the hands of doubters. But the real question lingered in the air had her daring shot hit the mark. The silence stretched, heavier by the second, as every pair of eyes waited to see the truth revealed. A faint crack echoed above the field, and every head tilted toward the sky. The flying target wobbled, a tiny chip breaking loose as it spun, but it didn't shatter. Instead, it carried on, staggering in its flight path like a bird with a clipped wing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She hadn't missed, but she hadn't fully won either. That single moment threw the arena into a whirl of voices. Some cheered at her precision. Others smirked, insisting it was only luck. And in the middle of the noise, She lowered her rifle, her expression unreadable, as if she knew the real test had only just begun. Among the competitors, a tall boy leaned against his polished firearm, shaking his head with a grin. He had always been her loudest critic, the one who called her rifle firewood and mocked her every chance he got. To him, the broken weapon was a joke, and her persistence a stubborn waste. Yet now, for the first time, his smirk held a flicker of unease. He whispered to the others around him, but his eyes never left her. Meanwhile, on the far side of the range, her younger brother watched with clenched fists. He knew what this moment meant for her. For years, he had seen her patch the cracks of that rifle with her own hands, sanding the wood late into the night, adjusting the sights again and again until her eyes burned. He knew she wasn't here to silence the laughter. She was here to protect their grandfather's legacy, to prove that his teachings still lived on. The officials spoke quietly among themselves, uncertain of how to score a shot like that. The rules were clear, yet the outcome wasn't. A target half damaged was still a mark of skill, but was it enough? The crowd leaned forward, restless, waiting for a verdict. And as the girl stepped back into line, her grip firm on the worn rifle, she felt the weight of not just the contest, but every doubt, every mocking laugh, and every unfinished story tied to that weapon. The real battle was no longer just about hitting targets. It was about facing the unseen line between doubt and belief. And no one in that crowd could predict what would happen when the next target took flight. The judge's whistle cut through the restless chatter, calling for silence. The next round was about to begin, and this time the targets would come faster, higher, and in unpredictable arcs. Every competitor knew this was the round that separated ordinary shooters from champions. The girl stepped forward again, her broken rifle pressed close to her chest, the scratches in its wood gleaming faintly in the sunlight. Around her, the others tightened their grips on polished rifles. Their confidence rattled, but not broken. The announcer's voice carried across the range, listing names in order. Her turn drew murmurs from the crowd, half curious, half doubtful. Parents leaned forward, children pointed. And the tall boy with the expensive firearm narrowed his eyes, determined not to be shown up again. For him, this was more than a contest. It was his pride, his image, and he was ready to take it back by any means. Then came the moment. The machine roared, and the first target shot into the air. It twisted sharply, climbing higher than expected before darting across the sky like a streak of lightning. The sun caught its edge, blinding in its glare. She lifted her rifle with practiced steadiness, but this time the air felt heavier, the silence deeper. Each second stretched longer as the crowd leaned forward, waiting for the crack of the shot. Her brother gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. He knew how much pressure weighed on her now. One slip, one hesitation, and everything she had worked for would be dismissed as luck. Behind him, whispers filled the stance bets being made, doubts being voiced, excitement thickening the air. She drew a deep breath, her finger brushing the trigger. The target curved sharply, faster than anyone expected, and gasps rose around the field. This was at the shot that would decide whether she was remembered as a fluke or as something far greater. And as her rifle steadied, every sound, every voice, every doubt seemed to fall away, leaving only the impossible flight of the target and the moment before the shot. The crack of her rifle rang out, sharp and steady, but what followed was not what anyone expected. The flying target split not into dust, as it should have, but into two jagged pieces, each spinning wildly in opposite directions. The crowd erupted in confusion, some shouting, some laughing, others gasping at the sight. It wasn't supposed to happen. The machine had never launched a target like that before, and even the officials looked at each other. It's uncertain whether to stop the round or let it play on. But she didn't lower her weapon. Her eyes followed the broken halves, one drifting downward and the other soaring higher, wobbling in the sunlight. For a split second, the field seemed to hold its breath again. Everyone assumed she would choose aim for the easier piece and take a safe mark. That was the logical move. But instead, she adjusted her stance, steadying her battered rifle as if she meant to take on both. The tall boy's smirk returned, certain she was about to humiliate herself in front of them all. To him, this was proof that she didn't know when to quit. Her brother leaned forward, his heart pounding, knowing this wasn't just recklessness. She had practiced for years with imperfect equipment, hitting split targets, chipped discs, even shards she had thrown herself when no one was watching. The broken rifle had forced her to train differently, harder, sharper, faster. What seemed impossible to others was exactly the challenge she had prepared for. The officials did not stop her. The crowd grew restless, and the air thickened with anticipation. Two halves of a target twisted through the sky, one dropping, one climbing, both slipping further from reach with each second. She shifted her grip, her finger brushing the trigger again, and for the first time, even her rivals fell silent. Because if she could hit both, everything about this contest would change.